Hi everyone. So I want to thank you guys all for coming out. I know it's the Wednesday before spring break, and so we're all anxious to get through this time. So I appreciate you giving up your time today. So I want to share with you guys that today I'm going to be talking about something that actually makes me feel pretty vulnerable. I'm going to be talking about my experiences being the first person in my family to go to college and then to go on to go to grad school. Finish grad school, yay. But the path that I took there wasn't pretty, it wasn't easy. And while a lot of people know that I am the first in my family to go to college, not a lot of people know some of the details and some of the things that it took to get there. So when I wanted to start thinking about what I wanted to share with you guys, ultimately I hope that you guys are going to get something useful out of it, especially if you find that there might be something that we have in common in terms of our experiences. But even if you're not the first person in your family to go to college, you might be the first at doing something. So if you are the first in your family of musicians that wants to be an accountant, or the other way around, when you're doing things for the first time, you kind of have to figure things out on your own, and sometimes when you're figuring things out on your own, there can be some mistakes that can be made. And if nothing else, if you have none of these things in common, then I hope that at the very least you'll get a different point of view. Ultimately, I think as educators, what we all want for all of our students is we want them to be able to listen to other people's experiences that may not be like their own, just to kind of broaden the idea that not everybody has the same life experience that you do. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about sociology, and that's because it's an occupational hazard. So like Danielle said, I teach sociology here on campus. Sociology is a super cool discipline that I hope you guys all are able to take a class. I love it dearly. So if your degree plan allows, I hope you'll take a class in it. But the reason why I think it's important to tell you guys I'm a sociologist is that we as sociologists are interested in understanding why things happen in the world, why do people do what they do. And when people think of that question, it's really easy to go towards psychologists. But psychologists will spend a lot of time thinking about their personality, development of the individual to help explain why it is that people do what they do. And as sociologists, we take a look at all the things that happen outside of that person. It's not to say that those things cause that behavior, but they definitely play a factor. And so just to give you a quick example of what that might be, I want you to think about how you decided what you guys were going to wear to school today. Now, in all of the years that I have been teaching, and I've been teaching for a while, and this isn't a challenge, just to be clear, I have never once had a student show up to my class with their face completely painted and them not wearing a shirt because they had a letter painted on their chest. Again, that's not a challenge. I don't recommend doing that on campus. And the reason I don't recommend doing that on campus is because usually that's something that we reserve for a very specific event. What event is that? Football, American football, exactly. Don't do that to somebody's wedding, not even your own wedding. Even if your spouse says that it's okay, it's not going to be okay, I promise. Again, not a challenge, it's just an example of how there's outside factors that influence kind of what we do. I share that because as a sociologist, one of the reasons why a lot of sociologists become sociologists is because they have these life experiences that end up helping them see the world from a little bit different point of view than they otherwise would have. So the more that people fascinate us, the more we want to understand them. The more we study sociology and we learn about all of these dynamics, we can't help but then use that sociology that we're learning and then go back and reflect on our own viewpoints in our own lifetime. So even though I'm going to be talking about my own experience from my own point of view, I'm a sociologist. I can't help but infuse the sociology. And you'll hear that throughout this talk as I go through some of the points I'm making today. Now, when we talk about this idea of these external kind of factors that influence our behavior, I'm going to ask you to do something really uncomfortable. And I know we're going to, because we're going to go deep real fast, and some of us just met. I'm going to ask you guys to think about something that you are afraid of, something that you fear. And it's okay if the thing that you're afraid of is like clowns or, the dark. But I'm talking about not just those types of fears, but the things that you really, really fear, the things that keep you up at night, the things that you stress about. The thing that I fear is I fear failure. I'm afraid that I'm not doing things right, or that there's something that I'm not doing enough, and that's something that I struggle with on the daily. Even something like this, as I'm talking, I'm afraid that I'm like, oh man, I'm totally messing this up. There's a gendered component to that. When we're socialized as children, we send the message, oh, well, boys will be boys. If they're messy, if they trip and fall, boys will be boys. But girls, we want you to do things right. We stress about perfection. You have to look right. You have to sit right. You have to act right. You have to do right. And so I carry that with me even today. I want you to hold on to the thing that you fear. I want you to hold on to it, because we're going to come back to it a little bit later on. So hold on to it. So, like I said, occupational hazard, I feel the need to give all this context. And so here's some more context. This is me. This is me, right, I don't have too many pictures from my childhood, but this is me right about the age, that very important experience that I didn't even know that I was having this experience or how important this moment was going to be in my life. I had no idea. When you're a child, you don't really think about your life in the way that you do when you're an adult. It's just life. It's not until you get older and you start talking to other people that you start recognizing, oh, wait a minute. Like, what do you mean? Other people have a mother and a father? Other people don't have to take the bus? So I'm the product of a single-parent household. I was raised by my mother, by my grandmother, the woman who I know is my grandmother. My family tree gets complicated, but we'll leave it there for now. And on the way home, one day that we were on the bus, and I thought, well, everybody takes the bus because we take the bus. We took a different route home, and we passed by something. And this is the closest picture I could get of the view that I had from that bus. And I was fascinated by that building. Anybody who's ever been around a child, you know that children are curious, and they have a lot of questions. So when we passed by this building, and I had all these questions from my mom. I was playing the 20 questions, not like literally, but figuratively. And we got to the point where my mom said, that's a college. And she said in that tone, the tones that moms have where they let you know, we're done with this conversation, this is the last word. And she said, college is a place where people like us don't go. And to this day, I have no idea who she was talking about. I don't know who the people like us was. And I hate to share this story because when people hear it, sometimes the first inclination is to think my mom is just this, like, why would she say such a thing? And I am my mother's daughter, and I know that if she were sitting here in this audience, all she would hear is, oh man, all the things I didn't do, all the things I messed up. She wouldn't hear any of the things that she did. And she wouldn't hear that studying sociology, even though I don't know who she was talking about, whatever group she was talking about, she was right. Years later, I would graduate from this very college that I was told that people like us wouldn't go. I would love to be able to take credit and say that that was all part of my master plan and that I had worked for that, but it wasn't. I didn't. In fact, I had enrolled at another college down the street. Actually, not really, but not too far from this school. And then through a series of all sorts of twists and turns, I ended up at exactly the place that I needed to be. It was all a happy accident, serendipity. But when my mom talked about the fact that people like us didn't go to college, if she was talking about race, ethnicity, well, here we are, Hispanics. There's a gap. We're lagging behind. If she was talking about enrollment by family income, well, she was right about that too. There is a gap between the low income and the high income. And high income families are much more likely to have children that go on not only to enroll in school, but to finish school. If she was talking about us, people who are products of single parent families, well, she was right about that too. Because there is a gap between those who enroll in college, those who finish, by whether or not we come from two-parent households or single-parent households. All of these things are things that we don't have any control over. These are things that are far beyond our reach, and yet they have a huge impact in what is likely to end up happening. And so this brings me to why I decided to talk about courage. When I first talked to Maggie, Ms. Mendoza, about this talk and what I would be addressing, I was thinking about incorporating this idea of being fearless. But the truth is that it's not about being fearless. The truth is that it is about having courage. I didn't know that I had incorporated that lesson as part of my truth. And I was very lucky that I was tracked. I think some of my teachers mistook, or maybe not mistook, but they interpreted my big mouth and my communication style, we'll call it, with other students as a sign of intelligence. So they encouraged me to be put into honors courses, advanced placement, and for those of you guys who have already taken my class, you know that I love to talk about conformity. We tend to go along with the group, and luckily I was with a group of folks who did things like be involved in extracurricular activities, take all of these, SAT prep and ACT prep courses. And then came along my senior year of high school, and even until then, I was president of the Honor Society. I was fourth in my class, and I still believed that I wasn't going to college at that point. That is until Nancy Crockett. Nancy Crockett was a high school teacher, and Nancy Crockett was a teacher you did not mess with. To give you an idea what kind of a teacher she was, it's been a minute, but she would stand by the window because she would keep it open, and she smoked all through class. This is the kind of teacher she was. So she went around the room asking everybody, where are you going to college? Where are you going to college? And everybody was answering, and I'm applying here, I'm doing this, these are my plans. And she got to me, and I said, I'm not going to college. Hello, didn't you hear? People like us don't go to college. And she looked at me straight in the eyes, and she said, don't be stupid. By tomorrow morning, you have to have 3 completed college applications. And I was like, oh man. You didn't mess with Nancy Crockett, rest in peace. You did not mess with her. So I went home, and I could not for the life of you tell, I can't remember what colleges I applied to. I probably went through and did what's the easiest application, what's the one that doesn't have an essay so I can have it finished by tomorrow. Otherwise, she will kill me. And I wish that I was speaking, in hyperbole, like she would. No, she really probably would have killed me. That's the kind of teacher she was. But I have been blessed throughout my career, throughout my entire lifetime, to be surrounded by people who had better ideas, better vision for me than I could have ever thought of for myself, and she was one of them. And so even though I was deathly afraid of filling out those college applications, I listened to Nancy Crockett when she said, you can make it in college. You can do it. It is possible. So that brings me to some life lessons I've picked up along the way. And one of those is that it takes courage. You're still afraid of it. But it's doing it even though you're afraid of it. And sometimes you got to listen to good advice. There are people that surround me and that I'm very blessed to have that encourage me to do things that scare the heck out of me. Do things like even things like this and share my story with people that I don't know if you necessarily wanted to hear my story, but yet I'm here sharing it. But sometimes, and it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but bear with me. Sometimes it takes courage to ignore bad advice. So, even though Our Lady of the Lake was exactly the place that I needed to be, it was, and still is, a very expensive private liberal arts college. And so at that time, I had already fallen in love with sociology from my very first intro class, but I was afraid. People didn't know what sociology was, so it wasn't like people were like, oh yeah, you can grow up to be a sociologist, because my family definitely didn't know what that was. So I was still thinking at that point, well, people know psychology, people know psychiatry, and I know I want to work with people, so maybe I'm going to do that. Well, in order to become a psychiatrist, you got to go to med school. In order to go to med school, you got to do the biology and the chemistry for majors. Well, I was struggling to pay for school. I was working 2 part-time jobs, I had a work study, I had a full-time course load, plus I had the biology and chemistry for majors, and unfortunately I learned that those were not a good combination for me. And so at the end of my sophomore year, when I didn't do so fantastic in biology and chemistry, I called my parents and told them, I'm on academic probation. I'm in danger of losing my scholarship, and if I lose my scholarship, I don't know how I'm going to finish school. And they told me in that moment, in that instant, with all of the love that they had for me in their hearts, they said, well, I mean, you've already done so much more than we expected. You finished 2 years of school. That's amazing. It's okay if you quit. Luckily, for me at least, I was able to think about reference groups. Again, those of you guys who are in my class, hopefully you remember this. When you're charting your path and you don't exactly know what you're doing or where you're going, you look to the groups around you and you look to their behavior. And we tend to do those things. Oh man, I want to be like them, and that's what they're doing, so I'm going to do what they're doing. And I looked at the folks around me who had lives that I was like, hey, those are pretty cool lives. I think I want to do what they did. They were the ones that said, yeah, no. You can work this out. You can get through this. Luckily, I did. You'd think I would have learned my lesson. But years later, when I was struggling through my dissertation, and I had finished my coursework, I'd finished a big chunk of my dissertation, I again called my parents. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And once again, they said, with all the love in their hearts they had, oh, well, if you really are feeling this terribly, then maybe it's okay to quit. Luckily, once again, I had angels in my world who said, oh, no, you cannot quit, because you're not just quitting. You are representing all of these folks, all of these groups that haven't had the opportunity that you have. Which means sometimes it takes courage to share our story. So in my freshman sociology class, my professor held up a chart where she had broken down the educational attainment of the various racial and ethnic groups. And she broke it down not just by the ethnic groups, but also by gender. And I can't tell you what the number was for the number of PhDs that were awarded that year that went to Latinas, because it wasn't even a full number. It was a fraction. And at that moment, when I looked at that chart, I said, crap, I don't know what a PhD is. I don't know what a PhD is, but we gotta do better than that. I'm gonna have to go get one, because we have to do better than that. Up until this point, I had been taught never share your story. Because if you share your story, you're gonna let other people know that you don't belong, that you're doing things you're not supposed to be doing. And so I was very protective of my story. I was afraid people would find out, oh man, you're too dumb to be here. Oh man, you don't belong here. You're not good enough to be here. And then I got to grad school. And I started to share my story. And then I realized, oh man, I'm not the only one that freaks out after this grad class is over. My very first graduate class I ever had was at A&M University. If anyone's familiar with that campus, we don't get to park very close to the campus, so we had a very long walk. And I have never run so far to my car as I did that day, because all I could think of was, please don't cry until you get to your car. Please don't cry until you get to your car. And I thought, I am the only crazy person that cried after their first graduate class. Months later, when I started to get to know my colleagues, my students, he made us all cry. It wasn't just me. He scared us all. He convinced us all that we were not going to make it. I wasn't the only one. All of a sudden, my fear wasn't so big. It wasn't so powerful, because I knew I wasn't the only one who had it. The thing is, and here's where the sociology comes in 2015, the number of PhDs that were awarded to Latinos is 5%, or 5% of those PhDs went to Latinos is probably the correct way to say that. In my lifetime, no pressure, but pressure, I hope that I'm gonna be able to see that number at least go up to double digits. We have to do better. I'm hoping. No pressure. Some of you guys I know. And it takes courage to honor your feelings. Because sometimes when you're trying to get through a class, whether that's a math class, an English class, it's not your thing, whether it's too many bones I have to learn, a statistics class, organic chemistry, whatever the challenges that you're facing, and we look at other people and we have the perception, why the heck am I struggling? And why does it come so easy for other people? It can be overwhelming, and there are times when you want to rail at the world, at the universe, at God, if that's what you believe in, or don't, that's cool too. You want to be angry, you want to yell, you want to scream, and it's okay. It's okay to feel those emotions. It's okay to be upset. And for me, when I was struggling, thinking, I am never Why did I start this path? What possessed me? I could have had a nice little life, a little simple life over here. And you're told you're representing an entire group and generation of people. I'm like, well, no wonder my back feels so heavy. No wonder I'm carrying all of this stuff. It's not fair. So I'm all about, if you feel like you need a pity party, throw yourself the pity party. Cry, scream, be sad, be angry. What's not okay is to stay there. You have to show life how gritty you are, because life will be challenging. It will challenge you. It will knock you on your behind. And it's okay. Sometimes, and I have done that literally and figuratively. And when that happens, sometimes I laugh at myself. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes it hurts. And I'm laughing and crying at the same time. And then you dust yourself off and you keep at it. When you're so busy focusing on how much further you have to go, you don't get a chance to give yourself the opportunity to look back and realize you didn't just jump from point A to point Z. It's one chunk at a time, one step at a time. And if you're wrapped up in the pity party, if you're wrapped up in the it's unfair, then you don't give yourself the opportunity to keep moving forward. And then, speaking of life being challenging, sometimes you make a plan for yourself and you think, I know exactly where I'm going to be in 5 years. I'm going to have my degree finished. I'm going to have children. I'm going to be married. We're going to have a life. This is what it's going to be. And then something comes along and it changes it. And if we're so busy focused on the thing that didn't work out the way you thought it was going to be, you miss out on, hey, but guess what? There's other opportunities that you didn't even know you were going to have. In 2nd grade, my mom was told that your daughter is smart. And my mom said, oh, good. That's wonderful. She can be a nurse. That was her dream. She wanted to be a nurse. She wasn't able to realize it, unfortunately. So I was her big hope. And then when I started high school, I had to sit down and have a big conversation with my mom. Yeah, about that nursing thing, Mom. It's a far better person than me that can be a nurse. I don't have what it takes. You know why? I don't even like my own bodily functions. And you want me to deal with someone else's bodily functions? Sorry, I'm not that compassionate. And she said, very sad and disappointed, oh, well, that's too bad. I guess that means you can be a bank teller. Those were my options, nurse or bank teller, because that's what she could envision, that's what she could see. And yet here I stand, and believe me when I say that when I was a kid, I didn't even know of a Tomball, Texas, let alone that I would grow up one day to be a professor in Tomball, Texas. And yet, this is exactly where I need to be. For me, education was my path towards this upward social mobility. It gave me a life I could have never dreamt for myself. I choose to be here because our current educational model wasn't designed with someone like me in mind. And yet here I stand. So I'm very proud to do work of all the places I could be, to be at a place where there are so many folks who think like me that education shouldn't be limited to just a few select individuals, that it should be for a lot of different types of people, whether you have had kids, whether you are a child yourself, whether you're going back for a second or third degree, whatever your circumstances are. It takes courage, though, to be able to see that path. So earlier, I asked you guys to think about the thing that you fear, the thing that stresses you out, the thing that keeps you up at night. Now, if you thought about it, if you brought it to your forefront, you may not have heard a word I said afterwards because you were so fixated on that fear. But guess what? You survived. You lasted the whole entire talk and nobody ran out of the room screaming. Nobody disintegrated into a puddle of, I just can't do this. It takes courage to be able to think of something for yourself that is beyond the dreams that you're capable of right now. Once you have that dream, once you have that plan, it takes courage to take the steps to work towards that plan. When that plan doesn't work out, it takes courage to think of a different path or maybe even a different plan. So my hope for you guys is that ultimately you find something that I said today here useful. If nothing else, remember, it's not about being fearless. It's about doing those things even when there is fear. My hope is that courage and serendipity do far more for you than what they've done for me, and they have done oh so much more for me. I'm going to put my email back up. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them right now. If you are like me and you need time to process, and on the drive home you think of something that you should have asked, I'll put my email up so that you guys can send me an email with your question. Or if you think there is something that I can do for you at some point down the road, I am happy to do what I can as well. So bear with me. I'm going to go back to the first slide, okay? And then someone's going to ask a question, and I'm going to flip through them again. Just watch. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Well, it should have been on that first slide. Obviously, I'm not perfect. I will put it up there in just a second. It's my first name, Janie. My last is period. My last name, Filoteo, at lonestar.edu. So sorry about that. I lied.
Any other questions from anybody else in the audience? And don't be shy because, there's a question back there.
Where did you go to college? I didn't hear.
Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio.
Did you attend a 2-year college or did you go straight there?
I went straight there. And so one of the things that I will often tell people is that I did college all wrong and I did grad school all wrong. And there's a gendered component when I say that. When I say that, it's usually women who are saying like, well, what did you do? And I'm like, I took too long, it was too expensive, I have all of these student loans. And it's men who are much more likely to say, but you finished, so what does it matter? You finished, you did it right because you finished. So no, I did not go to a community college, and I really wish that I had, because I think that I would have saved a lot of money, if nothing else. Yes?
Did you go straight to grad school after your 4-year, after your undergrad?
I did. One of the reasons why I stayed at Our Lady of the Lake, aside from fear, because it was my comfort zone, they had a weekend program, And so I was able to work because I needed to pay for that grad school while I was getting my master's degree. Yes.
So along the way, whenever your mom would tell you it's okay to give up and everything, that ever stick into your head that you should give up or that you should take a break?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, the number, if I had a penny for every time I said I wanted to quit, I would be probably richer than Bill Gates right now. So my dissertation was on reality television. And so I had a lot of these weird citations because I was using blogs and television shows and these weird things that the thesis office, they didn't know what to do with it, because usually people cite things like articles and books and things that they know. So I had finished my coursework. I had finished my dissertation. My professors had said, congratulations, Dr. Filoteo. But the thesis office, I wasn't going to get my degree unless the thesis office had signed off. And there was so much back and forth with the editing that even though I had already finished, I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna quit. And my parents, having no earthly idea what a thesis office was, were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you have to quit. And so there was many a pity party, where I'm in tears because of the thesis office. I didn't find out that I was officially graduating until graduation. When I say graduation, I mean I was literally standing there in cap and gown, getting the email, you've been cleared from the thesis office. And that's when, if I had cried before, I thought that's when I was really going to cry, but different story. So yes, many times.
So you said they always talk about quitting. So looking at you now at your job, do they have another perspective of you? Do they look at you in a different way? Do they still have that conversation with any other thing that you're doing in your life other than academics?
So let me answer the question this way, and I'm not sure if I'm going to address your question, but no, if I called them up today and said, life is too hard, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to go, I can't do this anymore, they would still say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, okay, you can come and you can quit, which I think is kind of funny, because I'm like, I think I'm past that point, Mom, but and they don't say that, and I know that makes them sound really, a certain way, but for my mom, everything that she did was for me and for her, and so the fact that she has a place that I can go to, she's very proud of that. And so if I were to say, I want to quit because this is too hard, she's very happy that she has a place that I can go and crash to. And she doesn't understand why I don't want to. I'm good. I mean, life can be hard, but I'm okay, I'm good.
So I guess a question that I have, so you presented about serendipity and courage. So what is the last piece of final advice for the students that we do have here? So for the students who are here, they're getting ready to go to spring break and kind of unwind and relax and, kind of forget about school for a couple days. So coming back into after spring break and keeping that momentum going and staying motivated, what would be the final piece of advice for the students who are here?
So I tell my students, enjoy your spring break. I know students love to have fantastic plans. I'm going to work on my project, I'm going to work on my paper during spring break, and I'm going to get ahead. It's okay if you don't, because spring break should be about succumbing to honor the feeling, right? I want a break. When you come back, then because you've just succumbed to the break, now it's time to succumb to all right, I got 8 weeks left, and I got to finish this strong. And the sluggish is one thing, the spring break was better, that's the not okay part. Because in the long run, it's the little pieces at a time that are gonna add up to the huge differences that you can't tell when you're in the middle of it. It's only until you get the hindsight that you're able to see, oh man, I stuck with it, and look at that, I was able to pass sociology or math or biology, whatever.
So, any last questions?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.